Elizabethan age, the period coinciding with the reign of England's Queen Elizabeth I, is considered to be the literary height of the English Renaissance. Poets and dramatists drew inspiration from Italian forms and genres such as the love sonnet, the pastoral, and the allegorical epic. Musicality, verbal sophistication, and romantic exuberance dominated the era's verse. Defining works include Edmund Spenser's Shepherd's Calendar and The Faerie Queene, the sonnets of Sir Philip Sidney and William Shakespeare, and Sir Walter Raleigh's lyrics. Drama specially flourished during this time, along with the comedies and tragedies of Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, and Christopher Marlowe. England prospered in the second half of Elizabeth's reign, and many of the great works of English literature were produced during these years. Art, poetry, drama, and learning in general flourished as the confidence and nationalism Elizabeth inspired spilled from the economic sector to cultural achievements. Elizabeth's reign saw playwrights like Christopher Marlowe, poets like Edmund Spenser, and men of science and letters like Francis Bacon. The era also saw the beginning of William Shakespeare's work. Many of the writers, thinkers, and artists of the day enjoyed the patronage of members of Elizabeth's court, and their works often involved or referred to the Great Queen. Indeed, she was the symbol of the day. The Elizabethan age, generally considered one of the golden ages of English literature, was thus appropriately named. These cultural achievements did not just happen to be created while Elizabeth was on the throne. Rather, Elizabeth's specific actions, her image, and the court atmosphere she nurtured significantly influenced, even inspired, great works of literature. From the beginning of her reign, Elizabeth was always a major patron of the stage, and drama flourished under her support. In the 1560s, the first blank verse tragedies appeared, ultimately giving rise to an art form that remains heavily studied today. In 1562, one of the earliest of these blank verse plays, Gorboduc, was performed for the Queen. Initially, a certain amount of class conflict arose over the production of plays, as the puritanical Elizabethan middle class tried to shut down the London theatres on the basis of their immorality. Thus, under major pressure, the Mayor of London attempted to close all the city's theatres in 1580. The Privy Council, citing Elizabeth's fondness for plays, prevented this measure from taking place, although they did allow the crowded theatres to be shut down in times of epidemics. Elizabeth, who liked to invite theatre companies to her palaces, was aghast shutting down the theatres because she wanted them to have fully practiced their plays before bringing them to her. As a result, plays became more socially respectable, and by the 1570s and 1580s, exclusive boys' schools like St. Paul's and Merchant Taylor's integrated the performance of both English and Latin plays into their curriculum, initiating the custom of the school play. The Queen even watched some of these school plays herself. In 1595, Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream was performed at Greenwich Palace during the marriage celebration of Burleigh's granddaughter. The play contained several references to Elizabeth and her court, especially to the water pageant Leicester had put on for Elizabeth at Kenilworth Castle in 1575. Then, at Christmas time, while Essex was gone to the campaign in Ireland, Elizabeth saw a performance of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Elizabeth herself was known for being a very good dancer and a particularly talented musician. Although she only played for her closest friends, she spent considerable time perfecting her renditions of several of the more difficult pieces of the day. Once her practicing was overheard by an envoy from Mary Queen of Scots, who, much to Elizabeth's pleasure, admitted that Mary Stuart, though good for a queen, was not nearly the musician Elizabeth was. Elizabeth I was a Protestant. She re-established the Church of England by means of the formal church in England. Everyone had to join their homegrown church, and there were laws about the kind of religious facilities and the prayers which could be said, but Elizabeth did not inquire about people's actual beliefs. She flourished in getting stability between the opinions of Catholics and the more extreme Protestants. In this manner, she shunned any religious conflict in England. Elizabeth turned out to be one of the most famous royals in the English history, chiefly after 1588, when the English overpowered the Spanish Armada, which had been sent by Spain to re-establish Catholicism and defeat England. The Elizabethan age has been so because of the contrasts with the eras before and after. It was a brief era of mostly internal peace between the English Reformation, with battles among Protestants and Catholics, and the fights amongst Parliament and the monarchy that would engulf the 17th century. The Protestant Catholic divide was established for a time by the Elizabethan religious settlement, and Parliament were still not tough enough to challenge royal absolutism. Throughout the Elizabethan age, English literature has changed from a shell into a delightful being with imagination, creativeness, and boundless stories. It was not about mystery or miracle plays, and the poetry was not nearby religion and the principles addressed in the church. The influence of personal beliefs or feelings rather than facts increased, and examining various features of life increased with the embellishment of plentiful authors. Elizabethan literature placed a great basis for English literature and influenced hundreds and thousands of writers of the following literary eras. It is for this purpose the Elizabethan period is known as the wonderful age of English literature. The major writers of the age are Philip Sidney, Christopher Marlowe, Walter Raleigh, William Shakespeare, Thomas Campion, and Edmund Spenser. Sir Philip Sidney was a soldier, scholar, English poet, and courtier who is known as one of the greatest prominent figures of the Elizabethan age. The best of the Elizabethans, Sidney was effective in more than one genre of literature, but none of his literary work was published until after his passing away. His greatest achievement was his linked sequence of 108 love sonnets. These sonnets, which he indebted much to Ronsard and Petrarch in style and tone, place Sidney as the supreme Elizabethan sonneteer excluding Shakespeare. Written to his mistress, Lady Penelope Rich, though dedicated to his wife, they disclose real lyric feeling expressed in a language delicately archaic. In form, Sidney typically adopts the Petrarchan octave A B B A A B A B A, with differences in the sestet which contain the English and final couplet. Worthy works of Sir Philip Sidney are The Lady of May. It is a one-act play by the English Elizabethan poet. The play pulls upon the literary custom of pastoral and is remarkable for its allegorical content concerning Queen Elizabeth I. Astrophel and Stella is an English sonnet order enclosing 108 sonnets and 11 songs. The title derives from the two Greek words aster and phil and the Latin word stella, meaning star. Therefore, Astrophel is the star lover and Stella is his star. The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia is also recognized simply as the Arcadia, is a lengthy prose pastoral romance written in the direction of the end of the 16th century. An Apology for Poetry is a work of literary criticism. It was written in around 1580 and first published in 1595 after his passing away. The Sydney Psalms was a 16th century translation into English of the Psalms. It was the great work of Mary Sidney and Philip, aristocratic siblings who were greatly influential Elizabethan writers. Christopher Marlowe. He was a great English poet, translator, and playwright of the Elizabethan age. He was the prime tragedian of his era. His plays are famous for the use of blank verse and they get the better of protagonists. Christopher Marlowe. He was an English poet, translator, and playwright of the Elizabethan age. He was the prime tragedian of his era. His plays are famous for the use of blank verse and their get the better of protagonists. Some scholars and researchers believe that a warrant was allotted for Marlowe's arrest on May 18, 1593. There was no given reason for it, however. It was supposed to be associated with claims of blasphemy. A manuscript supposed to have been written by Marlowe was supposed to encompass vile heretical concepts. On May 20th, he was carried to the court to be present upon the Privy Council for questioning. There is no record of their having met that day, and he was ordered to be present upon them each day afterwards until licensed to the contrary. 10 days later, he was stabbed by Ingram Fraser. Whether or not the stabbing was associated to his arrest is a mystery. Dido, the Queen of Carthage, is a short play written with contributions by Thomas Nash. It tells the intense dramatic tale of Dido and her fanatic love for Aeneas, his betrayal of her and her eventual suicide on his departure for Italy. The playwrights relied on books 1st, 2nd and 4th of Virgil's Aeneid as primary source. Temur the Great is a play in 2 parts by Christopher Marlowe. It is loosely based on the life of the Central Asian Emperor Temur. Written in 1587 or 1588, the play is a milestone in Elizabethan public drama. It marks a turning away from the clumsy language and loose plotting of the earlier Tudor dramatists and a new interest in fresh and vivid language, memorable action and intellectual complexity. Along with Thomas Kyd's Spanish tragedy, it may be considered the first popular success of London's public stage. The famous tragedy of the Rich Jew of Malta was written in 1589 or 1590. The plot primarily revolves around a Maltese Jewish merchant named Barabbas. The original story combines religious conflict, intrigue and revenge, set against a backdrop of the struggle for supremacy between Spain and the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean that takes place on the island of Malta. There has been extensive debate about the play's portrayal of Jews and how Elizabethan audiences would have viewed it. The tragical history of the life and death of Dr. Faustus, commonly referred to simply as Dr. Faustus, is an Elizabethan tragedy by Christopher Marlowe. It is based on German stories about the title character Faust. It was written sometime between 1589 and 1592 and may have been performed between 1592 and Marlowe's death in 1593. Dr. Faustus is based on an older tale. It is believed to be the first dramatization of the Faust legend. Some scholars believe that Marlowe developed the story from a popular 1592 translation commonly called the English Faust book. The troublesome reign and lamentable death of Edward II, King of England, with the tragic fall of proud Mortimer, known as Edward II, is a Renaissance or early modern period play written by Marlowe. It is one of the earliest English history plays and focuses on the relationship between King Edward II of England and Piers Gaveston and Edward's murder on the orders of Roger Mortimer. Out of all the rich material provided by Holinshed, Marlowe was drawn to the comparatively unattractive reign of Edward II due to the relationship between King and Gaveston. The Massacre at Paris reflects on contemporary knowledge of and attitudes towards events in France. The play has been dated 1592, 20 years after the Saint Bartholomew's Day massacre to which it refers. It also dramatizes the assassinations of the Duke and Cardinal of Guise and Henry III. Many of the play's themes would have been particularly relevant for England during the last years of Elizabeth's reign: the danger of a weak monarchy, reliance on favourites, the influence of nobles, and an insecure succession. The overall message of the play stresses the futility of destroying others for political gain, concealed behind a cloak of religious respectability, and while the events portrayed remain true to the historical record, they also act as a warning. Hero and Leander is a poem by Christopher Marlowe that retells the Greek myth of Hero and Leander. After Marlowe's untimely death, it was completed by George Chapman. The minor poet Henry Peto published an alternative completion to the poem. The poem was first published posthumously 5 years after Marlowe's demise. The poem may be called an epyllion, that is, a little epic. It is longer than a lyric or elegy, but concerned with love rather than with traditional epic subjects, and it has a lengthy digression. The poem is marked by Marlowe's unique style of extravagant fancy and violent emotion.